Hi guys. So today I thought I'd show you a pretty interesting um, fire starter tool that is easy to make, really inexpensive, lights very easily just with a ferro rod, and is completely waterproof. So this is the one that I've just made now, and I've made a couple of these. I've been experimenting with the braid. Um, but as a demonstration, let me a demonstration of the waterproofness. I've got a little jar of water here. While I talk about how this is made, I'll just throw this guy in the water and let him sit there, and we'll see how well he lights up in a couple of minutes. So basically, what I've got here is some jute twine. And this stuff is really inexpensive and it can be found pretty much in any hardware store. But when the twine is fluffed up, it has very fine strands, and it takes a spark and will ignite easily, very easily. So what I've done is taken some of this jute twine and braided it together. Essentially, I've got six strands here braided together, and then once I've braided the twine together, essentially just using one of these little tea candles, get the wax melting in the tea candle, and dip your jute twine braid, and so that it gets saturated in the wax, and let it let it solidify. And from there, we essentially will wind up with a nice piece of braid like this, saturated in wax. And from there, what we want to do is put it into a metal tube of some sort. And really, you could use any kind of piece of metal, doesn't matter really at all. I happen to have some 308 Winchester rifle round shell casings hanging around that I just cut the end off and am using for this. It's nice in that it's a larger diameter down here, so it's easy to insert the braid into it, and a smaller diameter up here, so it actually kind of hangs onto the braid a little bit up here. And the idea is that we're going to get a flame going here, and essentially you have a hollow matchstick to hold on to with your hand, and then apply the flame to whatever you're trying to light. And then I've just added this little piece of cord here, in case this does pull out. I'm not going to lose the two components; they'll stay together. So really, quite simple, costs almost nothing to make, and as we hopefully see in a moment, should be totally waterproof. So to use it, basically, you're just use your knife or the end of the striker for your ferro rod, and just fluff up the end of the jute twine, break it up into little fibers, and once you sort of have it mashed up a little bit, it's ready to use, and you should be able to take a spark and get a flame going. I've done a couple little experiments with calculations for burn time. So if I start with a fully saturated piece here and give myself 1 inch, I get about 2 minutes and 15 seconds of usable flame out of it, which is quite a long time. If I've already done a burn, what'll happen is, say I burn this down to here, some of the wax here will have been used up. It gets sort of wicked up and drawn up here. So after you've done a burn, the twine will have a little bit less wax than original, and 1 inch of that, of sort of pre-burnt stuff, will still give me about 1:15 to 1:30 of flame per inch. So yeah, again, that's pretty good. So let's see if we can get a demo going. This guy's been in the water for 2 or 3 minutes, and yeah, let's see if we can make it work. I'll just sort of pat it dry a little bit using my shirt here. This thing is still quite sopping wet. So It's got the standing water off it. Let's rough up this twine a little bit. And let's see if I can get it to take a flame, or take a spark. This isn't the best ferro rod in the world, but we'll see how it works. If I can actually get the ferro rod to spark, that would be beneficial. There we go. So once I actually got the ferro rod to spark, actually, I don't think the ferro rod is that bad. It's the striker's not very good. It works much better with my knife. But yeah, you can see how easily, once I got a spark to actually hit it, it lit right up. And that had been in the water for a couple of minutes. It's also fairly resistant to wind. So I'm blowing on that relatively hard, and it wants to keep going. So having applied this to a tinder bundle or whatever, this gives me a lot of time, even if it's a little bit damp, to get my fire going. This braid's a little on the thick side, so it's a bit tough to move up and down. So this braid here is a bit tighter. If I needed this to burn longer, it's just a matter of pushing it and exposing a little bit more wick. But anyways, this is a nice, handy, pretty compact, totally waterproof, essentially a tinder system that's pretty easily ignitable with your ferro rod. So hope you enjoy, and maybe give it a try. It's very easy to make. So let's spend a minute or so going over the basic steps. So we'll start with our jute twine. Essentially I'm going to double it and sort of mark out the right length and cut it. And the reason for doubling it is I'm going to sort of spin the doubled piece together into one twisted strand, which you'll see momentarily. So there's strand number 2, and strand number 3 is going to be measured out. They're all about the same length. So here's what I mean about doubling it and sort of spinning it into a single strand. So fold it over. Essentially what I'm going to do is twist it from one end, twisting it a whole bunch of times, and you'll see the cord becomes more and more raveled up. And once I've twisted it a bit on one end, I'll twist it some more on the other end, so that we kind of have an even amount of twisting down the length of the line. And once that's done, once they kind of have enough twisting tension, which I think we're close to here, I'll straighten the whole thing out and just sort of let it naturally twist up, twist together, essentially into a 2-strand piece of rope. And you'll see once I've got that twisted together, it won't easily unravel. So we'll do this 2 more times. So we'll skip to that point. Okay, so now we've got the 3 twisted strands all prepared. So I'm just going to sort of even them out and give them a trim so that they're all pretty close to the same length. You don't have to be super meticulous about that, but I tend to be a little bit sometimes. We'll trim them down, and I'm just going to tie a knot in the end here. Now you could use a constrictor hitch, or there's a few other ways of doing it, but just an overhand knot is good enough. It's quick and simple. And we'll pull that tight. So I'll pull on each strand until it's nice and tight. And from this point we should be essentially ready to start our 3-strand braid, which is a pretty basic braid. So the sort of thing that people would put into their hair if you had long hair or whatever. So just each strand is just going over and under the other one, and after probably only takes a minute or so to braid up that whole piece. So maybe we'll jump ahead to when we have it closer to being finished. Okay, so now I'm pretty near the end of the line, so to speak, and you can see we've got it roughly all braided up. It doesn't have to be pretty. The braid just sort of helps it stay together. So once I've reached the end, I'm just going to use just another small piece of twine that I had laying around, and I'm going to tie a constrictor hitch. And this is just a temporary thing so that it doesn't unravel when I'm applying the wax to it later. So essentially the constrictor hitch just goes over top of it and will pull tight and prevent it from unraveling. So we can, I guess, put up a link to how to do a constrictor hitch. And just as easily you could just tie a normal common overhand knot or whatever. Just something to prevent it from unraveling. So now that I've pulled that tight, we'll sort of trim the ends so that they're nice and neat. And trim the excess bits off the constrictor hitch. And now we're basically ready for the next stage, which is applying the wax to it. So what I'm using here is a heat gun, and heating that little tea candle up. Unfortunately, my hands are the heat gun get in the way quite a bit here, but so we'll just mostly skip past this. But really, I'm just melting the wax in that little cup, and then dipping the braid in until the wax sort of saturates the braid, and then we let it cool down. So I mean, you could do it this way, or you could put it on the stove, or you could light a candle and let it burn for a while until the wax melts. So whatever the easiest way for you to do this. So we'll skip to the end of this process. Okay, so I finished melting the wax and saturating the braid, and now it's just a matter of letting everything cool for a couple of minutes. So I'm just putting the braid up on the little anvil there for a bit and getting things out of the way. And then really the next step after that is assembling all the bits together. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the temporary constrictor hitch that was holding the end of that braid together. It's no longer necessary because the wax does a pretty good job of doing that, as well as once we insert it into our metal tube. That works well as also. Okay, so we've got the end off the braid, and before I put the braid in the tube, we'll just put my little light line in there, and I'll just tie an overhand knot so it can't pull out of the hole that I drilled in that casing. It was a 1/8 inch hole. Right, so the line can't pull through, and you can see the braid fits in there nicely. And now what we want to do is attach the other end of that light line to the back end of the braid. And I'm just essentially just poking a hole through the braid so that I can push the line through, and I'm just going to tie a figure-of-8 knot, a stopper knot, in the light line so that it can't pull back through the hole that I just made. And just like that, we're essentially done. So let's pull that tight. And we're good to go. And you can see if one pulls out or whatever, we're not going to lose the components. They're essentially tied together, literally. So hopefully you guys will give it a try. Thanks for watching.